Hello, I'm Toycat and welcome back to our second channel geography video. So are you considering starting a country anytime too soon? Because if so, you might look to South Sudan as an example. They are the world's newest country. They were formed in 2011 and they've got a lot of things going for them. I mean, they've got territory, they've got international recognition, they've got a capital and an airport technically, and surprisingly enough, they even have the support of the country they broke away from. Sudan pledges support all the time, and that is a really impressive, really rare thing, but the one thing they don't have is a good name. South Sudan is a terrible name for a country. It's especially terrible given that they broke away from Sudan, which means there's this very awkward thing where if you say South Sudan, are you referring to the south of Sudan, the country, or are you referring to the country of South Sudan? Also, if you're referring to the part of South Sudan which has the capital, i.e. the south of South Sudan, that is South Sudan, and therefore the north of South Sudan is North South Sudan, which is to the south of South Sudan over here, which obviously is not to be confused with the north of Sudan. It's very confusing, and Sudan doesn't even sound like a word anymore. This is why you shouldn't have geographical qualifiers in a title, and if you're going to have a geographic qualifier, it really helps if your neighbor does too. If this was North Sudan, at least that would make some sense, but it's not, and therefore, you know, this over here is North Sudan, and that makes things very confusing for everyone involved, and that's why in today's video I wanted to talk about things you shouldn't name a country, and indeed, I wanted to call out countries which have a very bad name, because no offense, it's not just South Sudan, it's the world's newest renamed country. The former Yugoslav Republic of Macedonia, which called themselves Macedonia, renamed themselves earlier this year to North Macedonia. Also a terrible idea, because North Macedonia is a country in Eastern, in the Balkans is the correct term, but Eastern Europe works as well. But here's the deal: Macedonia itself is a province of Greece, so it's like, oh, so there's two Macedonias, one is a country, one is a province, and that is extra confusing, and that's actually part of why Greece was vetoing that deal for so long. So yeah, the newest renamed country and the newest country, both not doing so great. Also, just while we're here anyway, we should call out the fact that if we're going to call out directional countries, did you know that Timor-Leste, so this is a Portuguese name, Timor-Leste, the Leste means east in Portuguese, which, fair enough. So it's like the east of Timor, because obviously the west of Timor belongs to Indonesia. I mean, that's just a fact that's a fact. So it's good that they call themselves the east of it. Maybe. No, it's not good that they call themselves the east of it, because again, same confusion. So West Timor is mostly Indonesia, except the part of West Timor, which is part of East Timor. So, oh god. But also, the island of Timor actually comes to, in the local dialect, it actually is named that way because it was an easterly island, which means that the name of the country is East-East, and then there is West-East, and then inside of West-East, there is a part of that which is called, there is the East-East inside of West-East. So on the west of East-East, there is East-East. And that, what? Why? Why does it have to be this way? Why do you have to do this of your geographical qualifiers? Never have a geographical qualifier in a name. It's widely accepted that it's a terrible idea. Even for continents it can be confusing, like South America, North America, but you can imagine how confusing it gets when you're like, oh yeah, this is North Macedonia, this is South Sudan, this is the Central African Republic. At least you can argue you're just talking about Central Africa and it's a republic. You're not saying it is Central Africa. Central Africa is the region. This is the republic that is there. But I really have to, give South Africa an annoying thing, because they claimed what should be a region of a continent for the name of their country. Are you talking about South Africa, or are you talking about South Africa? Confusingly, if you look at South Africa, entirely inside their own territory are other countries, which means there are parts of South Africa which are further north than countries that aren't South Africa. And yeah, it's not great, is it? South Africa, I understand why so many different colonies coming together and making a country, they needed a kind of neutral name, but was South Africa the answer? No, South Africa was not the answer. Yeah, it just has to be said. Western Sahara, I'll give a little bit of a break. I mean, sure. It's not really a country. It's like a weird, we're not calling it a country unit for now, even though it's administered by Morocco. But you know what, Western Sahara, do you mean the region that is a disputed territory because of weird colonial tie things? Or do you mean the west of the Sahara Desert, which, by the way, all of Africa is not a desert. I feel like I always have to remind people of that one as the map's really good at telling you where the deserts are on the earth. Saudi Arabia, desert. Egypt, desert, besides where all the people live. Fun fact. What's not a desert? Central African Republic. However, some of Central Africa is a desert. It's part of the Sahara. Anyway, so with that said, Let's move on from talking about geographical qualifiers, because I could do this all day. I mean, there's a place over here called Northern Ireland, but need I remind you that the furthest north part of Ireland is actually in Ireland, the Republic, the country itself, as opposed to Northern Ireland, which is part of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, and we'll get to countries of and in there later. But yeah, just very, very weird, because if you say Northern Ireland, do you mean Northern Ireland, or do you mean this? If you say Southern Ireland, it's like you're usually referring to Ireland the country, but like what about if you're saying the south of Northern Ireland, where the border is? Southern Northern Ireland? Northern Ireland? No, these are terrible geographical qualifiers, and whoever made them should be shot. Let's not shoot people. Let's shoot everyone. Screw it. That's what people do when we're mad about people. That's how people get their independence, it sounds like. Anyway, that said, the second thing that a country should avoid, in my opinion, I think it's very clear that like having a geographical qualifier is usually pretty rough. I can excuse Equatorial Guinea, but what I can't excuse is the Democratic Republic of the Congo. Fun fact, not only are there two countries called the Congo, there's the Democratic Republic and there's the Republic, but the Democratic Republic of the Congo actually has democratic in the title, which I think is a terrible idea. DRC, Dr. Congo, or the Democratic Republic of the Congo is a terrible name, and let me explain why. So I could show you the good. This is one of my favorite graphs on the internet. If you use the democracy index, which rates various parts of democracy, including access to voting, like the transparency of regime, etc. If you rate regimes around the world, you can see the average country, which has democratic in the name, is less democratic by over 1.5 points compared to countries without the word democratic. The average country with democratic in the name is actually an authoritarian regime. The closest one to not being the case is, because the full title, by the way, if Timor-Leste has democratic in there, is they're the most democratic country of democratic in the title. But still, we're not doing so great otherwise. So democratic, not a great name. Dr. Congo, call yourself. Call yourself East Congo. That's a great idea, right? No, come up with any other name. The Congolese, you can come up with a billion different names. Kinshasa Congo, even the locals who live between these two places call them Brazzaville Congo and Kinshasa Congo. You name them by the capital. That's a great idea. The capital is a part of nation building, and the fact that they have their two capitals next to each other still makes that less confusing than calling it the Republic of the Congo and the Democratic Republic of the Congo, which, fun fact, is usually considered the least or the second least democratic country in the world. Speaking of least democratic countries in the world, I feel like we have to mention at least a little bit South Korea. So South Korea, geographic qualifier, not a very good idea, right? But interestingly enough, the actual names of South and North Korea aren't actually those things. They don't refer to themselves as that, and if you look at actual news, it rarely calls it that, like, oh yeah, the DPRK cuts off all communication lines with the ROK not answering calls. If you're not big in your geography and you don't know your country names, it's like, so the Democratic People's Republic of Korea cut off communication lines with the Republic of Korea, and so what exactly just happened there? Whereas North and South is much easier to remember. North, the part where, next to China, they have some, very interesting Juche socialism principles. Maybe you call it communism. And the South is part of the capitalist West. They're friends of, maybe not so much Japan, but they're friends of the West, because that's what they like to be. There we go, it's simple. But however, the actual country names are the Democratic People's Republic of Korea and the Republic of Korea. So not only are they both messing up because they're doing the whole, let's call ourselves a republic so people know that we're democratic. Not only is it that, which is terrible, but also they both have similar names, and I think avoiding similar names to your neighbors should be another rule for this list. I mean, sure, it's really tempting when you're like, oh, but my neighbors have fun names. I think having a distinctly recognizable country name is important. Niger and Nigeria are both named after the river which flows through their territory, the River Niger, in case you're curious. Here it is, as you can see. It flows up through Nigeria and into Niger. Actually, it crosses the border with Benin. So why is Benin not called Benin, Nigeria? Because I've been in Nigeria recently. It's a terrible idea, right? There's a city on the Niger River called Niamey too. See, they didn't call it Nigerami. That seems offensive. But basically two countries named after the same feature. When you have a neighbor, which is called something, even if it's something you really care about, probably best not to try and call yourself them without the I at the end. Having confusion with other countries is a big problem, as I'm sure Slovakia and Slovenia can tell you. Slovakia and Slovenia both used to be part of countries literally 30 years ago. Actually, it's like 32 years ago now, let's say. Before the end of the Cold War, there was Czechoslovakia and there was Yugoslavia, and then when both those countries broke up, we got Slovakia and Slovenia, which to an outsider, you know that like, oh yeah, Slovenia and Slovakians, they're both Eastern Europeans, but distinct cultures, distinct histories, with a vague tint of socialism to both of them, but very different types of it, etc., etc. But to the outside world, a lot of embassy mail, which is very private and is meant for one country over the other, gets sent to the wrong country, and you really don't want stuff to be sent to the wrong address. I'll even give like a mild, almost to this for like, you know what? Along the same lines, probably not great that Sweden and Switzerland, like, you're not Swe and then like done, but that's fine. They're far enough away and they've got far enough parts names. But ideally, if you're going to start a new country next to Belgium, it shouldn't be called Belgium-y, for instance. Although, fun fact, do you know Luxembourg, the country, right? You ever heard of this country? Bet you haven't. It sucks. But, see, I love you, Luxembourg, except I don't really. But you know, the bigger part of Luxembourg is actually a territory of Belgium. Belgium-Luxembourg, actually, if you look on a map, you can see is actually bigger than Luxembourg. And I'm just saying, when you've got the same name as a territory of another country that has a bigger territory of that, maybe something worth considering as a change. And that's why, controversial opinion, New Mexico, in the reverse way, is a terrible name for a state. Sure, if New Mexico was bigger than Mexico, more culturally significant than Mexico, we could maybe get into an argument there. But otherwise, New Mexico is just going to cause confusion because it's like, oh, so is it Mexico but new? What do we mean by that? And actually, the next rule we have here is I think that countries should not use new in their name. I think new is a terrible, using new as a thing is a terrible idea. New Hampshire is a terrible name for a state because it's like, how new really is New Hampshire? They're one of the oldest states in the Union. By the way, their slogan really is live free or die. Like, there are two choices in New Hampshire, and one of them is die. So, you know what, they've got a fun thing. But New Brunswick as well. What's the scoop with that? Nova Scotia, which means New Scotland. And fun fact, while we're talking about New Scotland, allow me to talk about the country, which has literally got new in the title. I always lose it when I look at a map. Allow me to show you New Caledonia. So not only is New Caledonia named the same thing as Nova Scotia in Latin means New Scotland. New Caledonia in Latin means Scotland. Why are there two Latin words for Scotland is something I'd still like to dive into sometime. But New Caledonia is a terrible name because here's the scoop. Here's from the Discover New Caledonia website, newcaledonia.travel, because it's funny, countries have to have websites, like it's a huge part of their economy now. Like they do advertising for them. It's a weird thing that like you get ads for countries now that like visit our country, and it's weird part of the internet in 2020 that you get advertised to go places. It's almost like countries want you to visit. It's almost like that's not a bad thing. Hint, hint, nudge, nudge. People who think that, well, whatever, we'll dive into that a little bit. But anyway, you can see that New Caledonia was discovered in 1774 by British navigator James Cook. And although it's a bit interesting that, like, he discovered a country which was populated by Melanesians. So, like, I mean, discovered it in the sense that he brought it into the European world, which is the world order sequence of events that we generally follow. But, like, even if you argue, even if you're arguing that, like, oh yeah, it's only discovered when the British find it, even if we're going with that argument, which, sure, for argument's sake, it's the easiest way to explain history, that still means that this country is 246 years old. How new really is this New Caledonia? I mean, admittedly, old Caledonia, actually, what happens if we type in Caledonia? It'll probably just take me to Caledonian Road in London. Yep, I knew it. Let's type it in anyway. Caledonia. Will it know I mean Scotland? No, it thinks I mean the pub in Manchester. I'm just saying, is this the newer Caledonia? If you think about it, right? This pub for car scales and live music. Wait, let's look at it. I don't want to compliment any. The Caledonia looks kind of old, right? But you can see, like, is this Caledonia newer than the country? I think if the country was formed in 1774, or was discovered in 1774, and this pub, it looks kind of old. I could believe it's 100 years old. This should be New Caledonia. Is this when a new Caledonia opens up, because it's a popular chain that's clearly going to expand across the UK. By the way, these aren't chains. There's just lots of different pubs that all call themselves the Caledonia. Oh, Caledonia Chicken and Pizza. I bet this place looks way better. Let's make sure, just to be certain here. Oh yeah, this right here. Actually, this looks like a convenience store. I think I'm in a convenience store. It's a nice convenience store, though, for London. You see a lot of very, very rough-looking convenience stores around here. So anyway, as you can see, this is... Oh, there we go. Caledonia. I found it. Caledonia Chicken Ribs and Pizzas. Is that the new Caledonia? It's newer than the pub and newer than the country. New is just such a dumb prefix because new is a temporary state of being and a country is meant to be a permanent state of being. You know, one of the things you probably think I'm going to criticize here is like, oh yeah, I don't like the fact that there's so many countries called Stan. No, Stan is like a suffix that means country. Like that's why we have so many countries of Stan in the name. There we go. Wow, makes a lot of sense, right? You know, Tajikistan, Kyrgyzstan, Afghanistan, Pakistan, etc., etc., etc. You know, if you look inside of Europe, you see Greenland, Iceland, England, Scotland, Ireland, Netherlands, Deutschland, Poland. Like, you know, like countries and regions have, you know, names that mean land of something, as long as the descriptor before it is important enough. I just think new is a terrible idea for that reason. Also, New Zealand, you know? It's like, okay, fun fact, it's named after, you know, a lot of people think it's named after Zealand, the island in Denmark. You know, Zealand, great place where Copenhagen actually is, but it's actually named after Zeeland in the Netherlands. Fun fact, bet you didn't know that. You know, this is admittedly the older Zealand, but can you really call New Zealand new anymore? Like, I'm just saying, you know, New Zealand's a modern country. You've seen their passports. They're cool passports. You've seen the way they do everything in their country. It's a cool country. But you know what's not cool about New Zealand? I can't bring myself to say it. But you know what, the name, it sucks. I think just honestly calling yourself Zealand at this point, Zealandia, or you know, that East Australia, East New Australia. That'd be a much better name, right? No, it's terrible. Side note, by the way, do you want to see a place that has combined these together? New South Wales. I will never. This breaks every single rule. It's new, then it's a geographical descriptor. By the way, you know, not the southernmost point of Australia, not even the southernmost point of mainland Australia. It's New South Wales. They have a deliberately confusing copy of another country, then they've got South, and then they've got New. What's the scoop with that? Anyway, the final thing I wanted to mention that is a bad idea for a country, because we could go on all day. You know, how about we just insult countries all day? I think, you know, like, ands in a country is a bit awkward. Like, United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland, it's like, okay, fine name, but what about all the other things that are in the United Kingdom? Like Shetland and Orkney Islands, not part of Great Britain, not part of Northern Ireland. Are they not in the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland? Okay, well, they're close enough to the mainland. They're part of the countries that make up Great Britain, sort of, arguably, even though they don't. What about the Isle of Wight? I mean, whatever, we don't care about them, they're inbred. But what we do care about is we care about, like, okay, all of the other territories around the world that are technically a part of the UK. What about the Isle of Man that's distinctly owned by the Crown? It's a part of the UK, but not part of the United Kingdom of Great Britain and Northern Ireland. It gets very confusing very fast. But the last thing I wanted to mention is making countries forced to be pronounced in the local language. You know, Algeria, fun fact, is not what the Algerians call Algeria. Actually, I don't know what that one off the top of my head is. I'll throw it on screen.
الجزائر.
But most countries have an English name, and then they have a French name, and then they have every country generally has its own name for a place. It's really fun to go on Google Maps and to, like, get your location of something else to see what other countries call something. Like, did you know Japanese people call their own country Nihon? Fun fact, now you know. Did you know that you know, German people call their country Deutschland? But they know that to the rest of the world, it's called Germany. In fact, you know, France, you know, like yeah, France, for instance, even calls their airline Air France, and you know, there's a bit. Spain is called España, but you know, they know Spain as the international name for their country. It's fine to have a name for yourself and then a name for other people for yourself. One of my favorite examples is Germany across Europe has different names in all those languages, and it's fine. They know that people call them different things. But what is very interesting is when a country decides that everyone, regardless of what your name for a country is, have to refer to us in our native language. So there are only two major examples of this that exist on the Earth, and they're both a bit weird. Timor-Leste is one of them. You can't call it East Timor, which is what that translates to in English. You have to call it Timor-Leste, which is very confusing because, at least, you know, admittedly, they're kind of avoiding the East Timor by forcing you to say Timor-Leste. I mean, there's no other country of East in there with Leste in their name in English, because the English name for something is not the English name for the thing. But the worst offender, in my opinion, is Côte d'Ivoire. It's Cote d'Ivoire is what it's called in French. This is a country that insists that you call it their French name. And this is the worst thing in my opinion. Like, trying to insist that you use non-English words when using the thing in English. I can understand if you're like, oh yeah, when you speak French, you must call us the Côte d'Ivoire. Do not call us the Ivory Coast. I do not understand what that is. I do not know what this accent is, but it's vaguely offensive, but it's not African, so I'm in the clear, I think. But the Côte d'Ivoire is is the name for it in French. It's the name for it in the official language of the Ivory Coast. But you know what? What's wrong with the Ivory Coast? It's something people know and can understand. And honestly, informally, it comes up anyway. There is more confusion that comes about when you try to force people to use a name for your country that they don't use for it. It's like if, for instance, the United States of America, like it's called in a lot of like casual English, it's called America. And a lot of people are like, oh, America? Do you mean the consonants? I know you're referring to the country, but I'm being super obtuse and pretending I don't. I live in America because I live in Brazil. And like people say stuff like that all the time. It's a weird and wacky thing. But like, that's imagine if the United States was like, you can never call us America. You say America? We don't know. In fact, you can't even call us the United States of America. You have to call us the USA, SA 50 times. USA, 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 USA. It's like, oh, is that inconvenient and hard to say? Well, that's what we officially require. You'd be like, no, that's not what I'm going to do. I think it's that fun rule. This applies to real life of like, if you have to tell people you're something, you're probably not that thing. If you have to try and force people to use your thing, sometimes it works, sometimes it doesn't. If you try to insist you're such a nice guy, and you have to tell people about that the first time you meet them, probably not such a nice guy. Like, oh yeah, I'm so funny. When I say that, that's me admitting not funny. If people who are funny, they don't need to yell at that all the time. And to give an example of why this shouldn't be more widespread, because you might say, oh, but Toy Cat, you are disrespecting the local culture. I can't believe you. I'm gonna type an angry comment about how Toy Cat is an English of what was I think an Anglophile maybe. You think I only speak English? So here is the road sign at Slovenia. This is what Slovenia calls themselves in Slovenia. Slovenija, which admittedly would fix the problem of Slovenia and Slovakia, but that's an aside point that I'm gonna not argue against myself right now. But interestingly enough, if you go to say Hungary, they're fine if you call them Hungary, but if they insisted you call them in their local language, which is very far removed from the rest of European languages, their official title name is the Magyar Köztársaság. That means Hungary Republic, the Hungarian Republic. As you can see, this is what you would have to call them if they wanted you to. And obviously that's absurd. Every country has a full title, every country has a name in their own language, but to insist that anyone uses it, like, oh yeah, by the way, I know my name's Andrew, and, sometimes my instant name's Toycat, but I insist that you now call me, I don't know, Eswatini. Yep, I'm Eswatini now. You might think, Toycat, no, Eswatini is the country, you are a person, but you will call me Eswatini. It's just like, well, you can try and enforce that on me, Toycat, but I'm not going to do it, Toycat. Yeah, that's your name now, Toycat. And it's like, okay. Try to be nice to people. Try to call them what they want. But there's a standard where if you try to force someone, you're going to cause people to do the opposite. And that's why Ivory Coast over here. I call it Côte d'Ivoire, just so I can seem fancy. And I'm going to deliberately overwrite myself and say, no, the Ivory Coast. Except you know why it doesn't come up that often? Because the Ivory Coast sucks as a country anyway. You ever think about that? You ever think about how this is the first time we've mentioned Côte d'Ivoire in a year on this channel? This is a geography channel. We talk about countries all the time. South Africa's come up like 3 times this year. Mostly for murder, but... how many murders have you got, Côte d'Ivoire? I bet you don't have any. Yeah, get some murders and maybe we'll start talking about you. And maybe I'll start saying, Côte d'Ivoire instead of the Ivory Coast. So thank you very much for watching this video. I hope it makes you a slightly better dictator. And indeed, when you rule a country, just make sure you don't call it, of all things, New South Wales. Just don't call it that. Or the Democratic People's Republic of Korea. Or North Korea. Or, South Sudan, North Macedonia. They're bad names for countries on an objective level. And now you know why. Okay, hope you all enjoyed. Second channel. I do care. Goodbye.